All right. Let YouTube do its thing over there. Should be ready to go in just a minute. And we are going to start as close to on time as possible because I have another meeting that I need to prepare for later tonight. So I want to make sure we get as much material in today and are respectful still also of my other obligations. Okay. It is up and running. Excellent. So we are going to move back into more ritual type discussions. We've been doing many of the service elements. We talked about hatred, rebuke, and how we deal with other people. But now we're going to go back into something that is considered essential and iconic to Jewish living and life. It is the holiday that we celebrate the most. It is Shabbat, as you can see from the screen. Now, Shabbat is often misunderstood. People often think of it as being just a day of rest, but Judaism conceives of Shabbat as being something much, much more than simply a day when we stop work. That is part of it. And the next class will be about those work limitations, about what we don't do on Shabbat. But I want to show you through this first part what we add to Shabbat, how we honor Shabbat, how we show that we are remembering Shabbat, that Shabbat is doing much more for us than just giving us a break between work. Unfortunately, many people think of Shabbat as being the precursor to the weekend, which it is kind of, but they think of the weekend or Shabbat then as being purely about work or not work. And unfortunately, many of them even believe that we rest only so we can work more during the other days of the week. While that is physically true, that without rest on Shabbat, we would be less able to work during the rest of the week, that isn't the reason for Shabbat. It is a wonderful benefit. And of course, we should expect that the gift that God gave us would also help in many ways. But Shabbat has its own meaning, its own essence. And in fact, it is more important than what we do on the other 6 days. So with that as a bit of an introduction, let's see where we find out about this amazing holiday called Shabbat. Well, Shabbat is uniquely the only holiday that is mentioned within what is called the 10 Commandments, or the Aseret HaDibrot. And as such, we read about it like this, as the 4th commandment. Observe Shabbat and keep it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Shabbat of the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your ox or your ass, or any of your cattle, or the stranger in your settlements, so that your male and female slave may rest as you do. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God freed you from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to do Shabbat. There is so much to recognize in this beautiful section of Shabbat from the 10 Commandments. Like I mentioned, the discussion of work is something that we will save for next week's class. But just for the moment, notice that the theme of Shabbat, as expressed in this part of the 10 Commandments, is that Shabbat is a reminder of our liberation from slavery, that we were slaves in the land of Egypt, but we will keep Shabbat, which shows that we are not slaves. For a slave does not get a day off. A slave does not get a break. And even if a slave does get a break, it is only because of the calculations of the master, rather than as a recognition of their human dignity and the right that they have to be able to experience this moment with God free from the labor that is being imposed upon them. So Shabbat has this idea of freedom. But in fact, Shabbat has more than that. The passage that we just read was taken from Deuteronomy 5, which we read this week as part of Ve'etchanan, but it has the word shamor, to guard, to protect, to keep, whereas the word zachor is the word that is used to introduce Exodus 20, the 10 Commandments that first come in the order of the books of the Torah. Now, the word zachor and shamor both are used as the introductory word to this commandment, but they are different. Does this mean that Moses, who is repeating the Ten Commandments here in Deuteronomy, forgot that the word was supposed to be Zachor and accidentally said the word Shamor instead? No. Instead, it is that when God gave the command to Shabbat to us, as the Talmud teaches us, Zachor and Shamor were pronounced in a single utterance, an utterance which the mouth cannot utter, nor the ear hear. We are humans. We are trapped behind ears and using our mouth. Our tongue cannot say Zachor and Shamor simultaneously, nor could our ear correctly hear those two words if they were said simultaneously. But that is how it was given, meaning the protection of Shabbat, the refraining from work, and the celebration and honoring of Shabbat, the Zachor, both are equal partners in creating Shabbat. And if you miss one or the other, then Shabbat is not complete, nor is Shabbat being properly observed. Like I said, we are going to focus on the Zachor, on the remembrance of Shabbat, on the bonus actions we take to make Shabbat special. Now, as we see from Rambam in Hilchot Shabbat, there are 4 elements to Shabbat, 2 originating in the Torah and 2 originating from the words of our sages, which are given exposition by the prophets. In the Torah are the commandments remember and observe, Zachor and Shamor. Given exposition by the prophets are honor, kavod, and delight, oneg, as Isaiah 58:13 states, if you refrain from trampling Shabbat, from pursuing your affairs on my holy day, if you call Shabbat delight, oneg, the Lord's holy day honored, kavod, if you honor it and go not on your ways, nor look to your affairs, and goes on to explain how much better this will be. Now, the rest of that talks again about refraining from work, but you can see from the words of the prophets that we are not only meant to remember Shabbat, and not only meant to keep Shabbat, to observe it, but we are also meant to honor it and to find delight in it. Shabbat is not meant to be a burden. Shabbat is not meant to be an obstacle. Shabbat is meant to be something in which we find great happiness and joy, and through which we give honor to God and to ourselves. And that's really going to be the focus of this discussion. So what does the word honor, what does the word kavod mean in this sense? This refers to our sage's statement that it is a mitzvah for a person to wash his face, his hands, and his feet in hot water on Friday in honor of Shabbat. Please remember that all of our holidays begin the evening before, and that means that Shabbat begins on the evening of Friday, a few minutes before sundown, and continues through Saturday night. He should wrap himself in tzitzit and sit with proper respect, waiting to receive Shabbat as one goes out to greet a king. The sages of former generations would gather their students together on Friday, wrap themselves in fine robes, and say, "Come, let us go out and greet Shabbat the king." Among the ways of honoring Shabbat is wearing a clean garment. One's Shabbat garments should not resemble one's weekday clothes. So this is a collection that Rambam Maimonides has brought together of some of the ways that we can show honor to Shabbat. You will notice if you look through this list and see what is being discussed, that it is the same sort of treatment we would give to an honored guest. If there was someone coming to your house that was honored and respected by you and your family, you would not show up to them with your hands still covered in filth. You would not show up to them with your body uncleaned and your clothes dirty from working in the field. You would prepare yourself by making yourself look as respectable, presentable as possible. And if you truly honored the person, you would probably watch for them and look for them in anticipation, waiting to catch a glimpse of their car coming around the corner, their plane landing, the boat arriving, whatever it might be. And when they come, you would go out to greet them. And that's what's being described here. And indeed, the idea of going out to greet Shabbat has become part of our service on Friday night in Kabbalat Shabbat, the greeting of Shabbat. The first portion of the service we have each Friday night is the selection of psalms as well as songs that are designed to remind us that we are greeting Shabbat. Shabbat is not sneaking up on us. Shabbat is not just coming into our presence and we're ignoring it. We are actively greeting Shabbat and welcoming Shabbat as it begins to come. That sign of respect, that preparation of ourself, and that sense of anticipation, that changes our perspective and our feelings for Shabbat. Judaism is very full of ways that we change our actions and self and behavior, because we know that that changes our emotion, our minds, and our spirit. And this is a perfect example of it. If you greet Shabbat by ignoring its coming and are just found in, shorts and t-shirt on the sofa when Shabbat rolls around, you will feel different during the experience. Shabbat will still be there, but you will not be reaping all the benefits that you could be. When it comes to those benefits, one of them is to delight in Shabbat. Now, for many of us today, finding ways to physically have joy is not that hard. But for our ancestors, this was often something that had to be very carefully planned due to their meager supply of many of the things we take for granted. So, again from Rambam, a person must prepare a particularly tasty meal and a pleasantly flavored drink for Shabbat. All of this must be done within the context of a person's financial status. So you don't go out and put the $500 piece of meat on your credit card if you can't afford it. The more one expends for Shabbat and in the preparation of many good foods, the more praiseworthy it is. If, however, this is not within one's capacity, meaning you don't have the available cash to go crazy each week, even if one merely stews food or the like in honor of Shabbat, this is considered to be Shabbat Delight. If you make the best meal of your week Shabbat, even if it's not a world-class meal, if it is your best meal and you are making sure it happens on Shabbat, then you are finding delight on Shabbat. Now, again, one caveat, one is not obligated to strain oneself or to borrow from others in order to prepare more food for Shabbat. The sages of the former generation said, make your Shabbat as weekdays, but do not depend on others. So we don't borrow money, we don't take out loans or anything like that. We don't go begging to make our Shabbat better. We just make it better within our means. Now, all of this is, again, tied to the fact that our soul is traveling with our body. And when we please the body, it is easier for the soul to be at rest. When we please the body in appropriate ways, it is easier for the soul to experience the contentment that comes from living in this world in a way that is beautiful. And on Shabbat, that should be our focus, because the body and soul should be fully united on this time. Often during the 6 days of the week, the body's in charge as we are out working hard and labors of life. But on Shabbat, the soul should be much more the driver, and it should be able to enjoy that moment especially. Additionally, Judaism encourages sexual relations between a loving couple to be an additional part of Shabbat pleasure. Judaism has no problem within the beautiful world of marriage for the people to be able to enjoy each other's intimate company. We do not look down on it. It is not a sin or something to be distanced from. The fact that it can be a part of how we celebrate Shabbat by being intimate with our loving companion is really a beautiful statement, and something that is actively encouraged within our people. Both members, of course, still have to be willing participants. One should never do this either as a grisly obligation. Both should be excited and looking forward to each other's company. And if not, then other steps should be taken in the relationship to help them feel good about each other, and to especially find that time on Shabbat. Questions or comments about the oneg portion? Yes, Regina, are you asking a question? Oh, I can't hear you still. I think you're still muted.
Okay, the dinner, is it served? It has to be served when the Shabbat starts, or you can serve the dinner before the Shabbat?
Okay, so wonderful question. about what time do we serve dinner on Shabbat. So the short answer is it depends, which is, the great answer that Judaism loves to give. We're going to talk a lot more about how you cook dinner next week, because dinner has to be done cooking before Shabbat begins, because we're not allowed to cook on Shabbat. Again, more on that next week. But assuming the dinner is cooked and all ready to go, if you want to start Shabbat earlier, before the sun has gone down, before the official last-minute candle lighting time that you'll find in a calendar, and if you don't know how to find that, let me know. You can also go to hebcal.com, hebcal.com, and enter in your zip code to find what the lighting time is in your neighborhood. If you've got everything ready to go, you can welcome Shabbat early. But when you do, Shabbat has now officially begun for you. So all of the limitations that we talk about next week come into place as soon as you welcome Shabbat and begin it. So you can eat early. That's perfectly fine to have an early, or rather late afternoon meal and call that your Shabbat dinner, but that is then the start of your Shabbat experience. You cannot end Shabbat early, but you can begin Shabbat early. On the other hand, many people like to go to services and do the tefillot, to do the prayers of Shabbat, and they like to do that before they eat, and that's fine too. Again, as long as the dinner is simply being kept warm in ways that are fine with the Shabbat rules that we'll talk about next week, you can have your dinner when you get home from the synagogue, or after you've watched the live stream if you are watching it through that medium. So you can have Shabbat dinner at different times, but when you welcome Shabbat, Shabbat has begun for you, even if your neighbor is going to wait until the later time. Does that help answer? Great. Now, on the afternoon of Shabbat, that is to say Saturday afternoon, there is an additional delight that we have. It's called Seudah Shlishit. A person is obligated to eat 3 meals on Shabbat, one in the evening, one in the morning, and one in the afternoon. Now, you're probably going, but don't we eat 3 meals all the time anyway? Yes, but that's not the way they used to do it. For average people, for an average day of the week, they would eat only 2 meals a day. We are very fortunate and don't even realize it sometimes, and we usually eat 3 meals a day. So on Shabbat, they would require that we would eat this bonus meal to have that little extra time of Shabbat. And that means that for Seudah Shlishit, in the afternoon of Shabbat, after we have finished lunch, we have an additional meal. Now, during the summer, this is usually not much of a puzzle. We have that additional meal, and we might even call it dinner. It's still Shabbat, but it is our dinner time because the sun is still high in the sky. It is still Shabbat. In the winter, especially if you live further to the north, you have to work a little harder to sneak in that third meal for the afternoon to make sure that you have Seudah Shlishit before the sun has gone down, the stars are out, and Shabbat is over. But for most of the time here in Florida, it's not hard to have this additional meal. Now, where does this concept come from? Well, and Moses said, "Eat it today, for today is a Shabbat to the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field." What is happening here? This is a reference to the manna that was coming in the wilderness. And we learned many important lessons about Shabbat from the manna. Most importantly was that we could not gather the manna on Shabbat because it wasn't going to be there. Instead, today, Friday, we would gather it, or rather on Friday, we would gather it. And then today, meaning Shabbat, we would use the double portion from Friday for today, for 3 meals. So this is sort of the textual underline that reminds us to have 3 eatings in remembrance of this triple today of the eating on Shabbat. One of the other things that we do to delight in Shabbat is we light candles. Now, Rambam explains it as follows. the kindling of a Shabbat lamp is not a matter left to our choice, meaning to only do it if you want, nor is it a mitzvah that we are not obligated to pursue, meaning you should do it if possible, but you don't have to make it possible. Instead, it is an obligation. This is why we are so very, very careful to light the Shabbat candles before Shabbat begins. Both men and women are obligated to have a lamp lit in their homes on Shabbat. Unfortunately, people sometimes think that this is a mitzvah, a commandment only for women. That is not true. Although it is often customary to leave it for the women of the house to do the lighting, it is a commandment that a man living by himself would also light. And if it is more natural for the man to light in his house, there is no rule against that. It is simply a common custom for the women to light, but it is not restricted to them. Very important to realize this is a commandment that we all share. Even if a person does not have food to eat, he should beg from door to door and purchase oil to kindle a lamp, for this is included in the oneg of Shabbat, the delight of Shabbat. Now, you may remember Rambam just told us a few pages ago that we don't go around begging just to have a better meal for Shabbat, but here he is telling us that we should, in order to make sure we have light on Shabbat, that we light these candles. What could the possible reason be for this being so important to the delight of Shabbat? Well, we'll get to that in just a second, but let's finish off his instructions. One is obligated to recite a blessing before lighting, as one does before fulfilling any of the obligations incumbent upon us by virtue of rabbinic decree. And that blessing is Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat. Blessed are you, Adonai, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has made us holy through his commandments and has commanded us to light the candle, the light of Shabbat. I slipped and said candle. Technically, it is a light. It can be an oil lamp. It can be a candle or other forms. There are actually quite a few rules about what can and can't work. Candles are most common now because they are the cleanest, easiest burning, steady light that we have. In the ancient world, that was oil, and so that was given preference. Now, why are we lighting these candles? Why are we engaging in this? Well, people did not have electric light. I know that's a shock. You probably thought everybody's always had light bulbs, but it used to be that when the sun went down, it got dark, and that was all you had. You were done. And maybe if you wanted to light a candle or light oil, you would, but oil was expensive, and most people would simply go to bed when it had gotten too dark for them to be able to continue to see. On Shabbat, however, because we want to have the time with our families, we want to be together, we need light. But if you have already begun Shabbat, you cannot light at that point forward. That's something we'll talk about next week. That means if you want to have light on Shabbat, you need to light before Shabbat. This is a very important teaching, that if you want to actually have joy, you need to prepare for it rather than hoping it will just happen accidentally. And especially when it comes to being with your family, you do not want to be tripping and stumbling over each other in the dark and stubbing your toe on, the footstool. You want to make sure that your home is lit, that it is bright, that it is joyful and cheerful, and all of those avoidable mistakes and accidents are avoided. To do that, you need to have light. Now, nowadays, we obviously have electric light. It's very easy for us to do that, and we'll talk about the role of electricity in Shabbat next week. But the lighting of the Shabbat candles as a mitzvah still remains, and it still is a very important message to us. Now, if you've ever seen a Jewish movie at all, you've seen it, somebody lighting candles in a movie, you will see them wave their hands over the candles and then cover their eyes. Let me explain that custom. The custom of waving one's hands over the candles and covering the eyes, it's not directly mentioned in ancient sources. So this is not something you can find in the Talmud. This is not something you can find in the halacha. This is something that has developed in our communities. I just want to point out, I've got a a thunderstorm walking through. So if I lose connection, I'll get rebooted as soon as I can get the internet back up, but you'll know what happened. So the waving, right? Why would we do the waving? Many people argue that this allows us to focus our thoughts before saying the blessing. And the action mimics our spirit, drawing in the spirit of Shabbat. Some indeed will wave 3 times as a reminder of the 3 different parts of our soul, the nefesh, the ruach, and the neshama. Another time we'll talk about those different parts, but Judaism believes that our soul has different layers, if you will. And by waving 3 times, we are saying with our full soul, our full spirit, we are engaged in this action. Now, the covering, why would we cover our eyes before we say the blessing? Well, we wish to say the blessing before we enjoy the lights. These are the lights designated for Shabbat. There's a problem, however. If I light the candle, then I'm already enjoying it. And if I say the blessing, the concern is, then Shabbat has already begun and I can't light the candle. So to get around this, we have a little trick. We cover our eyes while we say the blessing. And then when we open up our eyes, it is as though we are seeing the candles for the first time. And so we put the blessing before the enjoyment of the light, now in their proper order, the proper sequence. You will all know and learn over time that Judaism is very, very strongly dedicated to making sure that we do the blessing first before the action. It is part of our mindfulness, our kavanah, ensuring that we have proper intention before the deed. Questions, comments? All right. So let's talk a little bit more about how we make Shabbat special, although really this is something that should be part of everyday life. Shalom Bayit, literally the peace or the harmony of the home. Said Rabbah, it is clear to me that if someone can't afford both and has to choose between a lamp for his house and a lamp for Hanukkah, the lamp for his house takes precedent. For Shalom Bayit, meaning because peace is important. If he has to choose between a lamp for his house and wine for saying a prayer of sanctification of a holy day, what we call Kiddush, which we'll talk about later, a lamp for his house takes precedence for Shalom Bayit. So as I mentioned before, and as Rabbah is emphasizing here, if you have to choose between doing one or the other of 2 mitzvot, you picked the mitzvah in this case that is going to allow there to be harmony in the house. If the house is dark, if the house is unable to be seen, that means we can't see each other, which is very much a metaphor for not being able to be at peace with one another. We need to make sure our houses are lit so that we can be together properly and at peace. This is Shalom Bayit, and the candles are a symbol of that. The Kiddush, on the other hand, has different symbols involved in it. Again, going back to Rambam, it is a positive commandment from the Torah to sanctify Shabbat with a verbal statement, as implied by Exodus. Remember Shabbat day to sanctify it. That is to say, remember it with praise of its holiness. This remembrance must be made at Shabbat's entrance and at its departure. At the entrance with the Kiddush that sanctifies the day, and its departure with Havdalah. We'll talk about Havdalah in more detail another time, but the Kiddush is what we say at the beginning of Shabbat itself. There is a very brief Kiddush done Shabbat after services, the midday Kiddush, but the primary Kiddush that is being discussed is the Kiddush that we say at the beginning, which declares the sanctity of Shabbat. And this is its translation. It is said over a cup of wine or of kosher grape juice. Blessed are you, the Lord our God, King of the universe, creator of the fruit of the vine. But then we get to the meat of the message. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctified us with his commandments and hoped for us and with love and intent invested us with his sacred Shabbat as a memorial to the deed of creation. Theme 1, creation. It is the first among the holy festivals commemorating the Exodus from Egypt. Theme 2, the Exodus or liberation and freedom. For you chose us and sanctified us out of all the nations, and with love and intent you invested us with your holy Shabbat. Blessed are you, Adonai, sanctifier of Shabbat. The Kiddush is reminding us of that twin theme of Shabbat, the theme of creation of what it is to be alive, exist at all, and the theme of freedom, because existence is meant to be free from the compulsion and enslavement that was characteristic of Egypt. So this celebration with the cup of wine is declaring the purpose of Shabbat so that we will be able to enjoy its entire period with the proper understanding. And I will sing the common melody for this, just in case you wish to review. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu b'shabbat kodsho be'ahava uvratzon inchilanu zikaron lemase v'reshit ki hu yom techila lemikrae kodesh zecher letziat mitzrayim kivanu v'chata v'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim b'shabbat kodshecha b'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. And then anyone else who was listening to the blessing would respond, Amen. So, in the balance for all of this, of how we understand it, I'd like to bring this teaching from the Mishnah. In the Torah, in the prophetic writings, and in the writings, that is to say, Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim, or Tanakh, our Bible, we find that Shabbat is weighed in the balance opposite all of the other commandments in the Torah. How do we say that? How can you say that Shabbat is somehow in any way, shape, or form equal to all other 612 commandments? In the Torah, how long do you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws? And it is written, see, the Lord has given you Shabbat. Therefore, on the sixth day, he gives you bread for 2 days. Again, going back to our manna story in Exodus 16, verse 28 compares God's rules, all of his commandments to us, with verse 29, where the specific commandment is Shabbat. Likewise, in the books of the prophets, but the house of the Israel rebelled against me in the wilderness. They did not walk in my statutes. Again, another word for God's commandments and rules. And my Shabbat, they greatly profaned. Again, only Shabbat is mentioned, even though the prophet is talking categorically about all the commandments. And also in Ketuvim and writings, you came down upon Mount Sinai and spoke with them from heaven and gave them right ordinances and true laws, good statutes and commandments, and you made known to them your holy Shabbat. From the writings of Nehemiah, we see that all of the ordinances, laws, statutes, and commandments, all of them are stated, but only Shabbat is listed. Shabbat is metaphorically and spiritually a link to all the other things that God has asked us to do. And so to ignore it would be the equivalent of ignoring all of the commandments. Now, I mentioned earlier that we find much about Shabbat from the story of the manna. And one of the things we do is the idea that having 2 loaves of challah, 2 loaves of bread for Shabbat. Said Rabbi Abba said, on Shabbat, one is obligated to break over 2 loaves. What is the reason? Twice as much bread is written. When we are told in Exodus 16:22 that we receive a double portion on Friday to prepare for Shabbat, this becomes a metaphor for having a double portion on the bread, the loaves that are the cornerstone of our meal. As it says in Shulchan Aruch, one breaks bread on 2 whole loaves that one holds. Then you eat from the lower one, this in the evening, but in the day and on other holidays, one takes from the upper loaf. This is in accordance with Kabbalah. So what is going on here? Well, you may notice that it is customary to hold the 2 loaves together, and many people will hold them with one above the other. And on Friday night, one will eat from the bottom loaf, and on the other days, one would eat from the top. The Kabbalistic intention here is to see in the placing together, the unification of the loaves, a symbolic appreciation of our ability to connect to God through both the more feminine aspected Shekhinah, as well as through God's more masculine aspect as well. By combining them, we are showing that God is indeed one, even if we relate to God in different ways at different times. However, on Shabbat evening, we tend to conceptualize with God and feel like we are connecting to God more through the feminine way. And so the bottom loaf is taken as a perhaps not too subtle hint towards a common positional relationship between husband and wife. Not that it's required, but it's one that would be well known in many couples. And as such, having the bottom loaf is reminding us of that connection to the more feminine aspect of God through the Shekhinah.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
There's two kinds of challah bread. I've seen one with raisin and one plain. Is there a preference in the bread, or does it make any difference?
The one you like best.
Okay. Okay.
So there are many different ways of making challah and many different recipes. I have a very special one that was given to us by a beloved congregant, Marian Datesman, Zichronah Livracha, may her memory be for a blessing. And it's the one that we use in my family. But there are many different recipes for challah. It is basically bread after all. And indeed, when it comes time for Passover, for Pesach, we will be eating challah that's made out of matzah. So there really are no obligations. However, it does need to be bread. So you can't substitute a potato for your challah. But apart from that, there is a lot of room for much variety. Now, there are additional bonuses that we include on Shabbat that make the day even more special. One is to bless our children. Again, if you have seen some movies or TV shows, you may see the parents putting their hands on their children's heads and reciting a blessing. What we say for our daughters is, may God make you like Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. What we say for our sons is, may God make you like Ephraim and Menashe, which is taken specifically from the scene where Jacob is blessing the children of Joseph in Genesis 48. And then for both our sons and daughters, we continue to say to each, may God bless you and guard you. May God shine his face upon you and be gracious to you. And may God lift his face to you and give you peace, which is known as the priestly blessing, as these are the words that the Kohanim, the priests, would use to bless us, and that we continue to use in other special occasions. But this is a special gift that we give to our children each Shabbat evening. We also have a gift that we give traditionally to our wives, which is the recitation of Proverbs 31, the section that begins with Eshet Chayil, or otherwise known in English, a woman of valor. This passage taken from the end of the book of Mishlei of Proverbs is a catalog of the ideal woman, which of course your wife is. And if you're not sure about that, then you need to talk to me and I'll help you understand. But it is a catalog of the beautiful traits of a wife in supporting her husband, helping her family, and leading her own life as both a merchant and tender to the community. Really an exemplary example of a person. And Eshet Chayil is recited in Friday evening as part of that preparation for Shabbat. For those that would like to say something for the husband in response, many people have begun to use Psalm 112, which is a beautiful description also of a strong, upright, and honest person. I'd like to conclude this evening with a very special quote by Ahad Ha'am, one of the great literary giants of the modern state of Israel. He wrote, "More than the Jewish people have kept Shabbat, Shabbat has kept the Jewish people." What he is trying to remind us through his clever wordplay is that, yes, we have the phrase, we keep Shabbat, the Shamor aspect that we will talk about more of next week. But really, it is Shabbat that has guarded us. Through the observance of Shabbat, this weekly reminder and deep spiritual moment, we have been able to endure despite numerous problems throughout our time and been able to thrive in even some of the harshest conditions. Shabbat provides a fertile ground to rediscover yourself, to rediscover your family, and to rediscover your faith. And its frequency should not diminish its special nature and importance. Its frequency should only thrill us that we have a chance to do this more than we perhaps think we do. Shabbat really is this exceptional island in time, as Rabbi Heschel said, a time where we are able to isolate and protect ourselves from so much of the world so that we can truly be ourselves in a way that often we miss during the 6 days of the week. We'll talk much more about Shabbat next week, but do you have any questions on the topics that we've covered today? All right. Thank you all so much for joining me this afternoon, evening. I'm glad the storm didn't knock me out, and I will see you all very soon, I hope.
I think it's about to hit over here really hard. I think it's interesting as well. Like as a kid, I wasn't really one to go to church very often. Like it wasn't something that was really forced upon me. But occasionally when I did go, like there never really seems to be this like focus really on connecting with, you know, your family or with faith. Every time I would go, it was always just focused on like the idea of what the things that you can do to get to heaven. Instead of like actual human connection, reconnecting with faith and everything. So I think that it's more comfortable. I think it's so much nicer to be able to really focus on that. It seems more positive to me.
Well, it certainly is what it's designed for. I will give you a small caveat. Mm-hmm. Some people are still capable of having a dead Shabbat.
Oh, I'm sure.
There are unfortunately people who can light the candles and say the Kiddush.
But they're not really in it.
But they're not really in it. They're still thinking about work. They're still thinking about other things. They're not spending time with their family. They might ignore them and just pick up a book, even though they are looking for attention. Shabbat is an opportunity, but it can't force us to do what we should be doing. But it is such an important opportunity that at least we have it. And it is such a welcome moment to have as part of our life.
Yes, I like the idea of taking time to like the healing of the soul and repairing that as like a focus after the long week and everything. It seems like it's a good focus on like the mental health, the spiritual health, and it's very nice. I like that.
Exactly right. Emotional, mental, spiritual, family. It's Shabbat is it's really this beautiful place where we can do so much that we could be doing during the week, but we often don't feel we have time for, or that we don't have the energy for. On Shabbat, we remove those obstacles, we remove those excuses, and we take care of what really matters most to us.
It's really nice. I like that.
All right. Well, thank you all very much, and I will see you all next time.
Thank you.